Hello and happy Thursday, friends. Welcome back to the Share Your Story podcast for the official season finale. I'm your host, Ellie B, and I'm so glad you're here. Today on the show, we're wrapping up my story from college to the present day. If you missed part one, please go back and listen to my conversation with Katie covering the first part of my life. In this episode, my roommate / best friend, Kelsey, is back on the podcast as a host to talk through post-grad experiences, grief, and life in my 20s. She helps guide the conversation through these beautiful and brutal chapters of my story, just as she walked alongside me throughout these years in real life. I am so eternally grateful for her. As a heads up, most of this episode is heavy and centers around my mom's battle with cancer, so I would definitely suggest listening when you have a quiet moment to take it all in for yourself. Thank you for listening so tenderly and offering encouragement through these intense parts of my testimony. So without further ado, here is part 2.
Here we are.
Back on the mics. I promise to get you better headphones next time.
I know. I want the over-the-ear ones. I can't wait.
Now that you're a
feel
toaster.
official.
Yeah, now that you're a toaster, you're like getting the podcast bug, what it's like to be a host. It's so fun.
I want my day job to just be to talk for like an hour and a half.
I think we could do that. Like, we're on our way. We just have to start somewhere. This is your 3rd episode, so now
I know.
We'll just keep progressing towards that.
Big time podcaster.
The thing is, you have to give the people what they want, and they want more of Kelsey.
Oh, that's sweet.
It's true. It's true. Even if you don't believe me.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for hosting in the midst of just crazy busy week, as well as just feeling a little under the weather.
Yeah.
We have a slight sticky shoes situation on our hands, but otherwise, it's great. Just a little sniffle.
But doesn't Phoebe sound better when she's sick?
She loves her
she sing better.
Yeah, she loves her little raspy voice. So maybe that's what people will tell you.
Okay,
maybe that'll be the feedback. We're always looking for some kind of positive feedback.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing this. Part 1, Katie. Part 2, Kels. So many Ks in my life always. Kat, Kelsey, Kaylee, Kayla, Kennedy. I know I'm forgetting people, but there's so many Ks. My mom was always like, I don't know how to differentiate between everyone. I would just like call her and tell her about people before she met people. She was like, because they all sound the K, all of them.
Yep. And they still do.
And they still do. They still do. Well, yeah. So part 2 of my story, kind of. Well, yeah, my story. And we're flipping the mics around, and you're here to host. And I think where we left off with Katie. Yeah. Why am I so nervous this time? I don't know. Like, I feel so nervous. Left off with Katie kind of around the college years, and you're going to take it all the way to the present day.
Yeah. So basically when I met you.
Yeah, literally. When we met. Yes, which crazy that we didn't know each other in college, both being Gators.
It is crazy.
Yeah. Just had to come home.
I know.
To become friends. It's wild.
Okay, Ellie. Let's
Here we
get back up.
Let's do it.
Post-grad.
Yeah.
Okay. So you graduated from Florida, and then what? Job searching.
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
I really I kind of talked about this with Katie, but I started getting really into Pure Barre, the workout class, when I was back home in 2015. And Just fell in love with it. Loved the workout, loved teaching. It gave me kind of like the choreography and dance mindedness. So I actually taught Pure Barre in college and helped like found the studio there under one of the owners, and then was teaching some even my senior year. So I would come back and forth a ton to Jacksonville, to home, especially during my senior year, because I taught at 2 locations for Pure Barre here. And at the time thought that I kind of had this promise from one of the owners that I would become studio manager when she was opening a second location. And so the promise after school was kind of like, you'll wrap up graduating, which I was a journalism major doing telecommunications, and I had like a PR and social media focus, but did a lot of sports reporting with ESPN on campus. But thought I was moving back to Jacksonville to run a Pure Barre studio. Came home and was still working for a while, and it kind of just kept getting pushed in different directions. It just like wasn't clear that I was going to be stepping into the role I thought I would. And so I kept kind of getting frustrated because I was living at home, which I loved. I came home a ton during college, and looking back, like I know that was really purposeful of all the time I spent with my mom. But I wanted, like, I was just watching people get jobs and careers. And because I kind of had this promise, I didn't do a traditional job search for a while. And as that was really not working out and kind of becoming more and more obvious that I might not ever get the job I was supposed to, I started job searching and applying to all these different sports jobs, like all over the country. I wanted to be in sports reporting or social media, marketing, any of that stuff. And my good friend Peggy was like, I'm not letting you leave. You are going to stay in Jacksonville. I'm committed to you staying here. I'm going to find you a job here because I don't want you to move. So she worked at Fanatics at the time, still does actually. And she was like, send me your resume. I'm going to get you a job. So I got a job with Fanatics in SEO, which had nothing to do with me. And they literally told me I was the personality hire, which I take. And I wear that badge proudly because I knew nothing at all. But it was the right job for the right time, and so many good people. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason I know what SEO is because of you.
And I still, like, there's so much of it I still don't know. I would come home and be like, I looked at a spreadsheet all day and we talked about spiders and TXTs and robots, and I'm not even sure if those are real or not.
Yeah. Don't even know what that is.
No. Not at all. Not at all. It was just like the best environment for the fact of like, it was a first job. We had like beer on tap, Wii games downstairs, like unlimited paid time off, wear whatever you want to the office. So it was very like, it was a good ease in to the 9-to-5 life in a lot of ways.
For sure. Did you always want to end up back in Jacksonville?
A huge part of me did. I think we have a similar experience in that we love family, home, and like a place where you belong. And I think I had cities and places that I would love to have moved and thought about it for a while, but I was such a homebody. And I kind of didn't touch on this a ton with Katie, but I just had really extreme anxiety in a lot of ways and went through a season of depression. And like, I think I used to equate like my safe place was home in Jacksonville. I think in a lot of ways it was really just like a space with my mom, but it was being here. And I always loved that Jacksonville had the beach, but also had some city elements and whatnot. And I think I just loved the idea that family was here. So I didn't have I think for a long time I thought I could move, but my goal was always to be back in Jacksonville.
Yeah. Same. I feel like we're similar in that way.
Yeah. I feel like there are things that like,
don't you want to move to a big city? Like experience something new? And I'm like, no. I want to be like where my people are.
Exactly. I think it's about the people. And I think in coming back, Jacksonville was a different Jacksonville than the one I left. And of the city itself, yes, but also just who I hung out with, where I hung out, what I did. Like, I think we share that too, in that like the Jacksonville we grew up in is not necessarily the Jacksonville we experience now. Like, for sure, there's still like, I love to go back to Gold Post, and there's still like the spots that I love, but I have a completely different life in Jacksonville than I did, but it's still the people here that matter so much.
Yeah. I feel like that's the beauty of like coming home after college, like moving back to your hometown, is you get to make it your own thing.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And I think I needed the comfort, and I honestly, so much of it was the Lord, because I always wanted to move back home and had a plan to, but even in Peggy being like, I'm going to get you this job, like I had also started going to 1122, the church that we go to, the summer before my senior year of college too. And so I felt like I had a church home and a place to belong in that I really loved. And even being here was so instrumental in being able to be alongside my mom. And I think I would have had a much harder time if I had like chased a job and chased a different city and a different experience and then had to try to find a way to come back or whatnot. Like, yeah, I mean, I always had the desire to move back here, but I think even the Lord placed that desire without me knowing why fully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then also during this time, your mom was diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
So what was that like being like in your young 20s, walking that out?
Yeah. So completely unexpected. We had such a sweet group of girls, which is, we kind of talked about in your episode, like how we met, how there was just a group of girls that all went to the same church and had similar backgrounds and things. And we just started Bible study and started meeting pretty regularly. And between that and then I'd also like once I'd started seeing a counselor that I really loved that summer, just kind of processing a lot of the like coming out of college and who do I want to be and whatever. And both of those things like really helped stand me up in a lot of ways. I would say like my senior year was a lot about like restructuring my identity and my vision and like who the Lord has called me to be and equipping me and whatnot. So I would say when my mom was diagnosed, she and I had like a fear of something was wrong for much longer than a lot of people did. And we used to call ourselves two bodies, one brain, just because we shared so many of the same like insights, thoughts, wisdom, that kind of thing. And she started getting this cough. It was pretty bad. And that summer had an incident at like a urgent care kind of place that sent her to the ER, and she had to go through all these tests, and they didn't find anything. And we kept going to all these appointments and nothing kept coming up. And I just remember being in that Bible study, and we were also new to each other, like as friends. And we would do prayer requests at the end. And I just remember being like, pray for my mom's health. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like it's something. And part of me didn't want to admit how serious I thought it was, but the both of us just kind of looked at each other over and over again when her cough wasn't getting any better. Kind of just aware that it was going to be something more serious. So when it actually, like the day that my mom was diagnosed, October 17th, I fell apart. I just remember being so like, I cannot believe my greatest fear is confirmed. And it's just the story that no one expects their life to look like. You know, you just never expect that word to be attached to your own family. It's just something you kind of hear from a distance. And I had started working only for about a month, but I was working home that day because my back injury had kind of flared up. And I just remember her coming in the garage and us just like staring at each other and sobbing. And I think, I mean, your original question was like, what's it like being in your young 20s? I just remember like falling apart, but also having this like assurance that like, but God's got her. God's going to heal her. And I just learned so quickly what it's like to rely on other people. I think I had been so, I can do it myself. And in times just felt so lonely that I felt like I only had myself to rely on. But I just remember feeling so like okay, I need to call on people. And I remember y'all all came over like that week and we went and sat in a park and I just cried. And I also just remember saying like, I don't know how I'm going to be the friend that I want to be because I'm so scared. And I think I'm going to have to give everything to my mom. And then the young 20s part of it, it was marked by such extreme juxtaposition because I had this like extreme faith confirmed in dreams, confirmed in words from other people, confirmed in prayers, confirmed in scripture. Like John 11:4 was something that was so huge. Like this sickness will not end in death. And so I had this like holy confidence that we were all holding ourselves up with because her diagnosis was so like stage 4 lung cancer and she never smoked a day in her life. Like it didn't make sense. And every doctor was like, you're too young to have this kind of cancer, which is so unhelpful. And it was just this juxtaposition between like my greatest fear, but being held up by so much faith. And then also I was having so much fun on like a personal place. Cause like we moved into our house in January and we were part of these friend groups that were so fun. And, I also felt like these years have been some that the Lord kind of redeemed some of that stuff I missed out on those early years of college of where I was so disciplined and on the team and like honestly just like didn't know how to have fun because I was so like committed to whatever I wanted as a goal. And so having this amount of just her being diagnosed in my 20s, it was this really hard balance between like I remember the first day she went through treatment. I was sitting with her in the chemo ward and she was getting so sick and all that. And then I went and showed up at a surprise birthday party that night. And it was just like the juxtaposition of those two things. I don't think I realized how much they lifted me up because I could be just young and carefree. But also it takes out a lot of energy because I wanted to show up fully in both places. Yeah.
Well, you did show up fully in both.
Thank you. Yeah.
I know it wasn't easy, but
yeah. I think that's one of the gifts my mom always gave me is just being as much as you can so wholeheartedly honest. And I wasn't always, and I didn't let my emotions go as often as I should have. I bottled a lot up, but I think like allowing myself to be fully in each thing. And that was my mom's biggest encouragement too, is like, don't miss out on this because of where I am. And I think some of that also was just, we were so confident she was going to be healed. So it was like, why wouldn't I be at all these places with my friends? Because I'm going to have another 45 more years with my mom. It just never even really occurred to us fully.
How long, I don't even think I remember this. Like how long was the season of like your mom being treated with like for her cancer?
Yeah.
Was it like a year, a few years, a year?
Yeah. Like a little bit. So she was diagnosed October 2017 and passed June 2019. So like a year and a half kind of, which is crazy because it feels like so much longer than that.
Yeah.
So wild. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
That's why I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you had to grieve in the midst of that season?
Gosh, a lot. My counselor was really instrumental, which I still fight her on this, but she was like, you have to recognize that grief is big and small. Like grief is the fact that you're missing out on things, but grief is also that your 20s are going to be marked by a different story. And so I would say it was a lot of things because I think I had been so reliant on my mom for so long that I was grieving that our relationship had to shift a lot in more of like, and not that she was completely incapable by any means, but just I was in more of a caretaker role of like, how can I come over and make dinner, or what's something I can do for you, or how do I don't know, like those early days especially were just so dark. and scary. And so instead of coming home and being like, hey, this is what happened at my first day at this new role or whatever, I was just like taking care of her and taking her medicines and all those things. And then I think the grief too was just that everyone has cares and concerns. I'm not discounting that whatsoever, but I remember specifically when I turned, I think 25, which would have been after she passed, but during that season especially, and like I went on a walk on my birthday and was just like, God, I feel like I didn't get my young 20s because it was, I mean, right after I graduated that she was diagnosed. So I feel like I grieved a lot of I remember like going on a run after work and then all of a sudden getting a call and I have to run to the emergency room, or little trips here and there. I was like, I don't know that I can go because I need to be with my mom. Like I remember a lot of my college friends, like they were so sweet and came and visited and supported and whatnot, but they had so much time together to like go on trips and go to games and all these things. And I just couldn't because I wanted to be present with my mom. And part of that is a choice. And that was part of my counseling too, was Alice, my counselor, always being like, you have a choice in the matter though too. Like you could go, but you are choosing to be with your mom. And so grieve that you're missing out or that you have to make the choice, but you are still the one in control of your own actions. But yeah, I would just say some of that like carefree, do what you want with your time, money kind of stuff that you get to do as soon as you have a salary and your own place and all that stuff.
Yeah, because it's the first time you feel like you're like, wow, I'm rich. Like there's so many things I could be doing.
Yes, 100%.
That's how your early 20s are.
Yeah, and I felt that for sure, like in comparison to so many other seasons. But I think there would also be times where I'm like, okay, like my mom needs this special pillow, and I know, you know, paying for these kinds of things is really stressful. So what are the little things I can buy to make sure she's comfortable or do for her? Or like we went on this super fun trip with Madeline and Laura to Charleston. I remember paying for just like dinners or just little things like that because I'm like, I didn't want it to be a thought or anything. And that was my joy and my honor to be able to do that, but just different than what I feel like a lot of people experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that stick out as beautiful during that season?
It's a really good question. Gosh. I would say as much as it was the hardest, being in your young 20s and being so aware of suffering, like I think that place where you in your young 20s are like, I have money to spend, I have a whole life ahead of me, I'm invincible, like this is my life now. Being in hospitals, seeing my mom so sick, like all that kind of stuff, and just honestly suffering in my own way of just like the sadness of what it was, like it gave me such a richness of like our hope is not in our circumstances, and just an awareness that suffering happens all the time. But the beauty of that being I got to spend so much quality time with my mom in small moments, and just the amount of like sitting and talking and sharing what God was doing, and that was so huge. And then I think because I also we were all just so desperate for hope because it was so dark and scary and intense, that the way that we could rely on each other and I felt like my faith grew tenfold. Like I was pulling at my Bible like it really was the thing that was going to hold me up, and just inundating myself with scripture and worship and all of that. And my faith grew tenfold, which it wouldn't have, I don't think, without that amount of desperation. And then the beauty of also people. Like I think kind of like I said earlier, I realized just how much it is important to depend on people and to let other people take care of you. And I think Enneagram 2 stuff, like I want to be the helper. I want to be the one serving everybody else. And to admit that I needed help and to admit that I wasn't okay, I just watched the way people did show up for me. And in small ways, like I remember a cat sending me something in the mail that was just like, here's a little gift just because I want you to have it. Or y'all just showing up on, like you showing up on hard days and being like, I don't know what to say, but I'm just going to sit. And that was really, really beautiful to see in action, because I think especially at a young age, that time is usually like, what's the drama going on, or where are we hanging out on Friday? And it was a depth to a lot of those relationships that were really so beautiful during that.
Yeah. I think like walking through suffering so young and like seeing you walk through it, I don't know. I think like I'm grateful for like experiencing that stuff sooner rather than later, because that, you know what I'm trying to say?
For sure. Because 1000%, I would say that's why that's part of the beauty is, and not to, I know there are a lot of things I grew up with that are very privileged and blessed, and I didn't have certain issues and face certain hardships that other people did. I don't deny that whatsoever, but it's like watching that amount of suffering and pain and sheer, like, I mean, watching death, we were never supposed to witness it, you know, and that amount of loss, that amount of trauma, I mean, hospitals, emergency situations, more than I can count. It does offer you a perspective early that most people don't get until later. That is like, you know, Jesus says, in this world you will face trials of many kind, tribulations of many kind, and suffering. He literally says suffering. And I think getting to experience that and walk alongside that is something I fought him on, but also is something that I recognize it is a gift to be able to experience the rest of my life. Because there's so many things now that I'm like, that just doesn't bother me because life is so much bigger. Or
exactly.
Or I know we're living for the purpose of heaven one day. It, like, as much as I take every care and concern seriously in my job or with friendships and relationships, it's like the traffic is not going to bother me. It's not that big of a deal.
No.
Yeah. And I would say that offered me that hugely. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just puts life in perspective.
It does. It does.
Okay. So walking through all that with your mom, she passed in June 2019.
Yeah.
So there was a season there where you went and lived, like you stayed at home with your mom for a good amount of time.
Yeah.
Towards the end, and the season with the codependence.
Yeah.
But like, what sticks out to you during that time?
Yeah.
Like, how did you juggle that little season taking care of your mom?
It happened so fast. Like, even now saying that October 17th to June 2019, I realize just how short of a time span that is. And I would say there was a moment kind of that spring where we had found out that she was going to be put in hospice care. And for, again, like, I don't even know how to describe with, and I probably sound like a broken record over and over again, but we just had, like, as much as I know my name is Ellie, I knew that my mom was going to be healed. It was just this confidence that it didn't matter what doctors said, like, we were going to see the other side. It was going to be a miracle. It was going to be the story that spread the gospel and transformed our family, our friends. We were like the city, the world. Like, we just believed that there was so much purpose in it. And so there was a time in the spring where the medicines that she had to be on because it had spread to her brain, just started to really, and the cancer just started to really take its toll, where our relationship completely changed. I remember trying to call her one day because I had this situation at work that I was so anxious about and worried about, and just wanting to call her and be able to vent and ask her advice and what should I do or what should I say. And she was like, I'm so sorry, I can't. This is what's going on with me. And yeah, our relationship just flipped. And I remember her saying to me in April of that year, the medications were really causing her to get forgetful or repeat conversations, and same with cancer. And it was so heartbreaking because I was just watching her disappear, but believing like she's going to be healed, she's going to be healed. And there was a time where she kind of said, I'd confided something in her and she shared it, and when I was hoping she wouldn't. And she just had this moment where she looked at me and we both cried, and she was like, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what came over me. I don't know why I would betray your trust like that. I didn't mean to. But I need you because you keep looking at me like I'm a real person. And I'm not just this disease, and that I'm going to be okay. And I think I just really carried that with me. So when things started getting really bad, I remember just starting to text people and being like, they put her on morphine, which I don't really understand and I don't really get, but it's making her really loopy and paranoid. And she keeps telling me, like, I don't want to be on this. I don't like how it makes me feel. I don't want to be on this medicine. And I kept having to, like, I was calling Trisha, who's a nurse. I was calling just like anyone I could think of like, how do we get her off of this? And she doesn't want to be on it. And it was during that I kind of realized, like, I need to be here more often, and I don't want to be anywhere else because I'm just watching her kind of disappear. And there was like one night where we were watching there's like a movie biography of the lead singer of Mercy Me, and he lost his dad to cancer. And I remember just like absolutely bawling watching this man's father pass away in the movie. And I like left the room because I didn't want her to see. And she came and found me and was like, I know this is hard and you don't have to bottle it in. And it was the first time I confessed to her, like, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. I just can't imagine life without you. And she just hugged me and said, I love you. You know I love you so much. And I think that was really one of the last times she was ever like downstairs in our house. And then it kind of just turned into like almost like nursing, but with quality time with my mom too. But we were all like on a schedule of like, who's going to sit with her? I was reading the Gospels to her every single night. And because that's what she wanted to read through. So I would sit by her bedside and read the Gospels, and we'd listen to music or do picnics on the floor, any of those things. And it was this place of juggling, like this, it felt suffocating to be in the room with so much just darkness, because that's what cancer does. And just the sadness of watching her not be my mom really anymore. But also like fighting with hope, and then just being kids. Like we really like, we played tennis, we swam in the pool, we played puzzles, we watched the Pink Panther 17 times in a row. We, yeah, like played Wii games and whatever. And, so it was like it was a bubble, and it was like one that, I'm so grateful I could be there the whole time. I can't imagine like going back and forth. So I think it was excruciating, but to be fully present there, and surrounded by everyone, like I wouldn't choose anything different. And then I had I remember one time you came over and you were like, we're getting out. We're going to a Memorial Day party. You have got to be in a different
Oh
location.
my gosh, yes.
Yes. You were
I
like,
remember that.
yeah, because you would come over and visit and just sit and be like, here's what's going on out here. And I'd be like, well, here's what's going on in here.
Yeah.
And I was like newly dating someone at the time. And we were like talking through that. And then, yeah, I went to that Memorial Day and you were like, I'm dragging you out because you need to like be around people who love you and just get outside of this house. And
Yeah.
that was so huge for me because it was a bubble and one that I was glad to be in, but I also so needed the reminders of like, you also have developed a life outside of this.
Yeah.
Because that's what I would return to. And I needed to be aware of that. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I love you so much.
I
want to hug you.
I know. Just we're in the same house, but separated by different rooms.
Yeah. Oh goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know this is such a hard, hard part of your story to talk about and to rehash. But when your mom passed, what was going through your head?
Yeah, I kind of told this story a little bit on Laura's episode, but I had a moment on the phone with Trisha where she was just like, Ellie, I think you need to let go. And I didn't know what that meant because we were so I remember telling my mom a few days before that this is just another lap around Jericho. They had to walk around 7 times before the wall fell. And so I know it's another day where you have to take these medicines and that you feel this gross, but we're going to walk around again. We're going to walk around again. We're going to see it fall. And so Trisha being like, you need to let go. I was like, it was in my spirit, I knew that was true, but I wanted nothing to do with it. So, yeah, I sat in the bed with my mom and held her hand and read the Bible with her. And I remember the night before, I had started to have okay, if we have to have a service, I want everyone to dress in all white. I don't want black. And I could start picturing me standing there and all this stuff. And I was like, that had never been something I had thought of in the past or been able to picture and never wanted to. I mean, still didn't, but I absolutely could not sleep the entire night before. I just was restless and up. And without going into too excruciating details, it was just really painful watching my mom pass and take her last breath, and just the sounds, the fear, all of it was so, I can still hear it. And we all really sat around the bed and had this there's no way this is happening. But also there's this relief because we know she had been in so much pain. And honestly, we were all, which sounds so selfish and ridiculous, but we were all so tired of just the schedules, the just the sadness of every single day. My dad crying because he didn't want to give her the medicines that he had to, and sitting beside her bedside and helping. And yeah, we all just were sitting around. But so I think the emotions of the day itself were all over the place because there was still this hope, which sounds so crazy, I know, but there was still this hope in the back of my mind that she's going to be like Lazarus and raise up for the dead. And then there was also this, to be honest, in a lot of ways, it just felt like we lost. It felt like evil won, darkness won, and the light didn't. And I was just in such utter shock and disbelief in a lot of ways on behalf of my mom's story. There was just so much more that I wanted for her. And even though she's in heaven, which is where she would want to be anyway, and any of us would want to be. I had a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment, and a lot of, I think the first few months after even, I just had a lot of sadness because we didn't really have like goodbyes or anything. Like I remember, I wrote my mom a Mother's Day card, which was in May. So like a month before she passed, and it sat unopened because she just didn't have the capability to read it. And because we were so confident she would be healed, there weren't these like parting words of wisdom from my mom, or like a goodbye to me, Mary Claire, my dad, or I'm leaving you with this, or we didn't say our goodbyes either. Like we didn't have any like, I mean, we did, but we were just so sure that there wasn't like a mom, thank you for this. And that plagued me for a long time afterwards, just because it was like we lived with such hope to the very last breath, and even after that, there was just not a lot of closure in that regard. Yeah.
What was it like going back to a normal, and I say normal in quotes, life?
Well, pretty quickly after, we took Mary Claire to New York for an internship, and so there was kind of this buffer between like, I think right after, because there were so many people around, and so many like Laura and Madeline and Emma had been there for so long, and my mom's friends and my friends and Mary Claire's friends, like being in that bubble to go back to the real world was like, I don't know how to participate in this whatsoever. But we took Mary Claire to New York first, which was like, it was an amazing thing because we got to all be together again, me, Mary Claire, Emma, and Madeline, and do something fun and get out there. But I also felt like such a zombie in a lot of ways, of just like a shell of a person. And so entering back into, quote, normal life was one of the hardest things. Like I remember going into work and opening up, because I had also started somewhat of a new job not that long before. I remember opening up a like Google Doc on my work computer and just typing, why am I here? Because I think you experience, and I didn't have an option in the sense of I need to pay for rent and like go and create some sort of normalcy, because I was 24 years old. Like there's things you still have to do and be responsible for, but it was so jarring because so much was still the same, and yet everything was different. Just the losses that, like, I remember even going to New York, like sitting on the plane, and it's the little stuff of like texting your mom, like, hey, made it on the flight, like, hey, we boarded, whatever, that I was like, I can't do that anymore. Like I can't even pull that up. Or I had like an infection and was sick in New York, and I was like, who do I call to be like, what medicine do I get and what do I do? And then re-entering back into work, I was just like, what is the point of all of this? Like, why am I getting up to sit at a desk for this long to do something that is like, feels purposeless and feeling like just like a shred of a human being, but still also wanting to be like, show up as a friend, and figuring out like, how do I go back to church and what do I do? And then it's also just, there were definitely some situations where I felt so supremely disconnected because of what I had witnessed. And that's not anyone's fault, but it's just like when you watch death, when you watch like a dream or die, like just all those things, it's like, I don't really know how to sit and gab about like the latest episode of The Bachelor. And part of that is my own personality. Like Mary Claire and I are so different in that she's like, distractions, fun things, what can we talk about that's so different? And and that was a help to me. Like, we both had to kind of, I think, learn off of each other. But yeah, that was so jarring. I was so glad to have my own home to come home to, and that was such a big encouragement. My mom was like, you have to have your own life. That there was definitely some comfort in that, but it was brutal for sure.
How did your relationship with God change during that time too?
Oh, completely. It's like not a, well, it felt like I couldn't say it, but I was so disappointed in God. And disillusioned and felt completely disjointed, which was so hard because he was so my lifeline during that year and a half of treatment and all the bad news over and over and over again. And I felt like he just abandoned me, that he stopped talking to me. He stopped. I remember, like, even the night my mom passed, I texted y'all, the like group of friends, and said, like, I want to go watch the sunset. And it poured rain and there wasn't a sunset. Like, it was barely, and I was like, he couldn't even give me this. And then like the day of my mom's service, we were trying to have it on the beach, and torrential downpour, worse than you've ever seen. Like, they were like, it's like hurricane winds. And I kept just feeling like, God, are you mocking me for believing this much? Like, you just up and left. Like, we believed for this long all the way to the end. And then you said, okay, my time's done. See y'all. And so I felt very, very disjointed, but I think because I'd walked with him for so long and just seen the example of my mom, I never wanted to say he's not an option, or I don't believe, or I don't, like, I think it was ingrained in me to such a point that it wasn't going to change, but I had to relearn. I think it stripped back a lot of the I started to get to a point of like, can I even trust that I hear God anymore? Or he's always spoken to me in dreams, and like, any of the dreams I've had mean nothing. And does prayer work? Like, is there a point in begging and praying and fasting, all these spiritual disciplines, if he just going to choose what he wants to do anyway? Like, why does it matter that I am praying? And so I never lost the Jesus is the savior of the world part, because that would have meant, where is my mom? Like, and I knew she was confidently in heaven sitting with her first love, but relationally with the Lord, it was completely different for me. I didn't know how to, you know this actually. There's that song by Stephanie Gretzinger, I think.
Yes.
And sorry to say, still never gonna.
You're never gonna let me down. Every time they sing that in church, we cringe.
Because that's what I felt. I was like, no, God did let me down. He did. And he's kind of redeemed that song for me in a very different way. But
yes,
that's what I felt. I felt like God let me down. And he also, well, what I felt like is he led me down a path, because I could have from the beginning heard from the doctor, this is stage 4, incurable, nothing's going to really work, but we'll try some stuff, and just believe that from the beginning. But I felt like he gave me all these signs, wonders, and confirmations in the scripture. Like, I'm praying Psalm 41 and I don't know, 2 Corinthians 5. Like, there was so much stuff that he showed me that I was like, okay, you literally led me down a path, and then you did let me down. And I know, I've come to that place that it's because I finished the story for him, and I thought that I knew what was best and what would give him the most glory. And I still have questions. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. There's still times where I'm like, was the best answer really for me to not have my mom and for the world not to have her beauty and impact? But coming to that place of I'm not the creator of the universe, and I don't know what's best. But yeah, I would say that's really when I found podcasts too, because I just had to hear other people's testimonies of, no, I don't understand it either, but I still love God.
Yeah.
And I think it was a place of like, I think over and over again, I said, my allegiance will forever be to you. I'm not going to fall off that, but I don't know how I really love you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would say that was the basis of that season.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you've lived a lot of years since then.
This is true.
As you look back over the last few years or even beyond that, how do you see God's faithfulness?
Yeah. I think because I started to get like, and I still believe in all those things, that prayer, the dreams, that all those things matter and are a way that God speaks to us. But it forced me to really get in the scriptures and see him for who he is. I know there was a question I started asking last year, the year before. Like I know what God did for me in sending Jesus to be the propitiation for my sins, and that I'll have a place in heaven one day. But do I know why I love him? I know what he did, but do I know why? And honestly, in some ways, it doubled the grief, but it was also so what's the word I'm looking for? Pivotal, I guess, to me, like walking through 2020 and COVID, because there was a lot of uncertainty there. And it was like 2019, my personal whole world fell apart. And then 2020, the whole world fell apart. And we didn't know what we were doing. And there was a lot of strangeness and craziness in that. But I think more than anything, when you watch something like the globe all of a sudden collapsing on itself, it forced me back to, okay, but I know I can trust God. I know the entire world is in his hands. And it kind of brought back that foundation. And then since then, I think it's been coming to that place of you are God and I am not. And in that, asking him to show me who he is or what he has for me. Like even the house that we're sitting in, like that, I know was the Lord. I know like the timing, the season, the job I was in that allowed me to get it, like all these things that I can look back and say, like, the Lord is the one who pointed me to that. Or the people, like, I know I say this all the time, but genuinely, I mean, I had a couple of sweet, like really great girlfriends through elementary, middle, high school, but I prayed so deeply for someone to like walk alongside with. And I saw the answers to those prayers in people in college, and then especially afterwards. And like, I mean, I tell you this all the time, like, I literally don't know how I would have done any of this without you. And the faithfulness that the Lord had to bring someone who in so many ways, like temperamentally is so like my mom, and just such a gift, and being willing to show up. Like, he showed it to me. Like, I was looking for the ways of like, my mom's going to be healed, and this is going to be our testimony, and we're going to go around preaching this to everybody, and all these people are going to come to know him. And it's like, he keeps showing me his faithfulness in big and small ways, but especially through people that he's just placed in my life. And and I would say a little bit that song, like, you're never going to let me down, he really redeemed that to more like, he's never going to let me go. And he might let me down based on my own expectations or desires, but he'll never let go of me, and he holds me so near, so dear. And he'll never let go. So I'd say in the last few years, it's been kind of back down to the bare bones of my faith of who he really is and why I really love him, and the hope. That's the biggest thing, is through losing my mom, I felt so hopeless. Like, it says hope deferred makes the heart sick, and I was heart sick for a really long time. But I think the last few years, over and over again, he showed me he is the hope. He is our hope. And what do we have other than that?
Yeah. Wow. What do you hope for in the future?
I know, not
Your
over
story's
yet.
not
Oh my
over
gosh,
yet.
so much. The list is long. You hear it often. Gosh, so many things. I think, honestly, so much of it is actually, this year has been a lot about, like, how do I reconcile the, like, differentiation between my mom's story and my story. Not accepting so much of what we walked through together as mine as well. Been going through a lot of healing prayer on that, of like, what does my story look like? That this is a huge part of it, but it's not my story because it was my mom's. And so I really want to find ways to honor her and her life in big ways, while also finding my own independent way of doing that. Hope for a husband. We know that. Hello, Lord. Thank you. And hopes for my family, for sure. And I think one of the things that in the places where I'm still like, okay, Lord, where is this? Or why haven't you delivered this? Or Lord, I'm coming again to ask, or I'm still feeling this pain here. He's shown me how much of a full life he's given me. And in ways I didn't expect. Like, I think, like I mentioned, this season of so many friends and people and flexibility in my schedule and all that, like, that's the stuff I missed out on in college. And he's redeeming that and offering it to me in such a brand new, glorious way where I can fully live it. He has given me just fullness of relationships. I look back and when I struggled with loneliness or rejection a lot in school, I love being the person that everywhere I go, I'm like, I know 3 people here. Like the guy who we got cake from the other night at dinner and happy hour with Brooke and Tyler. Like, he walked up and I'm like, I know that guy. He just offered me a lot of, even just this past week, like my birthday was so huge and honoring and full of so many people and experiences and all those things. I just was like, my life is full. So my hope is for more fullness in other ways, for sure.
That's beautiful. That's my hope for you too. That's beautiful. That's my hope for you too.
And you.
Okay, well, this is the end of season 1 of Share Your Story with Ellie.
Yeah.
What's your hope for the podcast? Moving forward.
Great question. So many hopes. So much of this came out of this book proposal boot camp that I went through, and at the time I was writing a book, which maybe one day will get published, maybe a different version of it will, but and the book was called Faith Like Jane, and really the premise being like believing God still is who he says he is, even when he doesn't do the thing you thought he would do. And out of that process just really came like this podcast, and clearly I love to talk, and but I love sharing other people's stories and hearing stories. And so I think this season 1 has been so foundational to so many people and stories that have been impactful to me in the last few years. And just over my lifetime. But I'm also convicted in where I want to make sure that the microphone and the spotlight is constantly shared on other people and not just my own. But I think for the podcast itself, podcasts were something that's so like I said, lifted me up when I was like, I don't know where else to turn to. I know I want to turn to God. I don't know how to. So I need other people's stories to provide that kind of hope for me. And so I hope to do the same with other people. I want to invite so many more people in just to share their stories. And I think too, I've just been so changed by so many different people. Like I think I thought life or friendships had to look a certain way, and my view of that has been so expanded. And so I just want to share so many more stories. I hope it grows. I hope it's in front of a lot of people. One day would love for this to be more of a full-time situation.
Yes.
Just because I love it so much. So that would be my hope personally.
Yeah.
But I hope the podcast in general offers people hope. Because it's what I needed. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Ellie B. The final question.
Turn
the mic around to you.
I love it.
What is the one word you would choose to describe the current chapter of your story?
Harvest.
Ooh.
Yeah. I felt like the Lord gave that to me on December 14th, actually, which has been a thing. But yeah, I think these last, and we've been talking a lot about it too, actually. This is our 6th year of living together, which is so crazy. Yeah. And 7 is really the big year of completion in scripture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Roads are being paved. We're heading to year 7.
They are.
Literally and spiritually, hopefully. But I think this past 7 years plus has just been a lot of enduring the seasons, of planting the deep roots, of excavating a lot of the bad stuff, of weathering the intensity of the storms, and pruning, lots and lots of pruning. And I think a lot of growth under the surface, that's been so necessary and needed. But I think this next season is about the harvest, bringing out what has been growing for a long time and seeing the fruit of a lot of those hard years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love it. I believe it.
More harvest.
Yes. So good.
Praying and believing it. Thank you for doing this and for walking alongside me, truly. I don't know what I would do without you.
Me neither. Thanks for letting me host you. And ask all the hard questions.
All the hard questions. If anyone's going to steward it well, if anyone's going to steward it well, it's you, with such patience and grace and kindness. And I hope I'll get the other headset so it convinces you that much more that you get to be back on the podcast multiple times.
I can't wait.
Look how your tone has changed just even in episode 1 to now. She's caught the podcast bug.
I have.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll see you in the kitchen.
Okay. Love you.
Love you. Bye. Well, friends, praying and hoping for more harvest, even for the show. Thank you so much for tuning in to listen to my story. I pray it offers insight into my life, but more importantly, I hope my story offers hope that Jesus always holds the details of our stories in His hands. I know God is who He says He is, even when I feel disappointed that life hasn't turned out the way I planned. He is faithful forever. While this season of the Share Your Story podcast comes to an end, there is still so much more in store for the show in 2024. Please make sure you're following along on social to stay up to date with upcoming guests, new interactions you can have with the show, and most importantly, when we'll return for season 2. I ultimately feel called to this work, but you showing up and listening, sharing, sending encouragements, and tuning in every week exceeds every single one of the expectations I could ever dream of. I'd love to continue the conversation about which stories impacted you, so please comment on Instagram or leave a review. They really matter so much to me. Please know your story matters. I cannot wait to see you soon for season 2. Talk soon.